You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, the lights are completely off, the house is just dead silent.
Yeah, and the only thing illuminating the room is that harsh blue glare from your phone screen.
Exactly. And you started out with a perfectly innocent intention, right? Like you noticed a weird, dull ache in your elbow.
Or maybe a slight flutter in your chest.
Right, yeah. And you thought, I'll just look this up real quick. Because usually when we turn to the internet for information, we expect a very straightforward transactional relationship.
Like looking up a recipe.
Totally. You type in, how long to boil an egg, the internet gives you a number, you boil the egg, and you go on with your life.
It's neat. It's linear.
Yeah. You expect that same neat process for your body. You type in, why does my elbow hurt? You expect a list of stretches, and then you expect to just go to sleep.
But that is almost never what actually happens when it comes to medical queries. That transactional nature completely shatters the moment you hit enter.
It really does. You step through this digital looking glass into the reality of the 2 a.m. internet spiral.
Oh, the 2 a.m. spiral. We've all been there.
Right. Suddenly that simple recipe search is gone. You're scrolling through forums, clicking on increasingly alarming links, and within like 15 minutes, your mild headache has just been diagnosed by an algorithm as a rare, incurable condition.
And your heart rate is up, you're sweating, and sleep is just completely off the table.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are taking you on a journey into a fascinating and, frankly, kind of mind-bending intersection of human psychology, modern medicine, and artificial intelligence.
It's a massive topic.
It really is. Our mission today is to unpack a giant stack of research that explains exactly why that late-night spiral happens.
We're going to explore how your own brain is biologically wired to literally amplify physical illness.
Yeah, and how traditional medical systems have historically benefited from keeping you in a state of fear. Plus, how a revolutionary new AI system is attempting to give you back your free will.
It is a remarkable set of materials because we're looking at this problem from completely different vantage points.
Right. What kind of sources are we dealing with here?
Well, we have peer-reviewed clinical neuroscience, psychological breakdowns of compulsive behavior, and even philosophical essays on the history of medical authority.
And some internal R&D documents too, right?
Yes, specifically for an AI system called Dr. Maya GPT, designed by a physician with 40 years of critical care experience. And what's fascinating is how all these disparate fields point toward the exact same underlying crisis.
And I want to tease something right up front, just because this completely changed how I view my own behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That 2 a.m. Google spiral we just talked about.
Yeah.
It isn't just a bad habit. It isn't, a lack of discipline.
No, it's a highly predictable, documented psychological trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this new AI, Dr. Maya, was specifically engineered to freeze that trap and break it. But to understand how the machine fixes the problem, we first have to understand the human biology that causes it.
We have to start with the fear. You cannot fix the medical diagnostic process without first addressing the psychological state of the person asking the question.
So true. Treat the panic before you can treat the pain. So let's unpack this. Let's get into the mechanics of that panic.
Right.
In the materials we reviewed, specifically a psychological breakdown of how the brain plays tricks on us under stress, there's this concept they refer to as the disaster movie mind.
Yes. In clinical terms, this is catastrophic thinking, and the source material describes the underlying mechanism beautifully.
How did it work?
Well, catastrophizing is when the brain takes a tiny, ambiguous, or insignificant event and instantly, without any logical friction, projects the worst possible outcome.
It just jumps straight to the end of the world.
Exactly. It's a total failure of emotional regulation. Imagine you make a small typo on a presentation at work.
Okay, yeah, it happens all the time.
A healthy cognitive response would be to notice the error, feel a brief moment of mild annoyance, fix the typo, and move on.
Right, no big deal.
But the disaster movie mind bypasses logic entirely. It sees the typo and immediately generates a narrative.
Like, my boss is going to see this, I'm going to be exposed as incompetent.
Right. And then I will be fired, I won't be able to pay my mortgage, I am going to lose my house, and I will be destitute.
Wow. It leaps from a misspelled word to the apocalypse in a fraction of a second.
Yes. And while that's exhausting enough in a workplace scenario, when you apply that disaster movie mind to your physical health, the results are deeply destabilizing.
Because your body is constantly producing sensations. Right. Like digestion, muscle twitches, minor shifts in blood pressure.
Exactly. But when you are in this cognitive state, you feel a slight fleeting twinge in your chest.
And your brain skips right past the highly probable explanation of indigestion from that spicy dinner.
And it lands immediately on massive fatal heart attack.
That is so relatable. And what the psychological research reveals is that this catastrophic thought immediately triggers an urgent behavioral response.
Yes, known as the reassurance trap.
The reassurance trap. Let's unpack that for a second. Because on the surface, seeking reassurance sounds like a totally healthy coping mechanism.
Right. If you're scared, you ask for help.
Ex-
It sounds healthy, but the mechanics of it operate exactly like an addiction.
Wait, really? Like an actual addiction?
Yes. When your brain projects that disaster movie about your chest pain, you experience a massive, uncomfortable spike in anxiety. Your nervous system is screaming that you are in danger.
Okay, I'm tracking.
To alleviate that unbearable psychological pressure, you desperately need someone or something to validate that you are safe.
So you engage in a checking behavior.
Precisely. You ask a partner, does my heartbeat feel normal to you? Or you call a doctor. Or most commonly today, you ask a search engine.
And the source tells you it's probably just heartburn. You're fine.
And you feel better. The anxiety drops.
Yeah, that wave of relief.
Yes, but only for a fleeting moment. That feeling of relief is temporary because the underlying catastrophic cognitive distortion hasn't actually been resolved.
So it comes back.
Within hours, or sometimes minutes, a new doubt creeps in. What if the search engine is wrong? What if I didn't describe the chest pain accurately?
What if my partner isn't a medical professional and missed something?
Exactly. The anxiety rushes back, demanding another hit of reassurance. It becomes a compulsive loop.
Because you are seeking 100% absolute certainty about your health, which simply does not exist in the biological world.
It doesn't, and it's a vicious cycle that literally physically manifests.
Yeah.
The psychological sources also detail how this intense, trapped anxiety leads to body-focused, repetitive behaviors.
Also known as BFRBs, right?
Yes. Things like compulsive skin picking, severe nail biting, or hair pulling.
Oh, wow. So the brain gets so overwhelmed by the abstract, uncontrollable terror of a potential illness that it seeks to create a physical discomfort that it can actually control and observe.
It's desperate for a physical outlet for all that psychological pressure. It's trying to externalize the internal chaos.
Right, but this raises a massive question for me. Because so far, we are just talking about hypochondria.
Right.
You're talking about the fear of illness.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into actual physical, measurable disease? Because the sources we have aren't just saying it's all in your head, are they?
No, they're saying something far more profound and honestly far more unsettling.
Unsettling how?
To understand this, we have to look closely at the peer-reviewed medical paper in our stack by Dr. Arthur J. Barsky on a phenomenon called viscerosomatic amplification.
Viscerosomatic amplification.
Okay. This paper completely dismantles the traditional, archaic way the medical establishment has viewed the human body for the last century.
Because historically, medicine operated on a very rigid, dualistic model. Right?
Yeah.
They drew a hard line in the sand.
Yes. On one side, you had medically explained symptoms. You have a fractured femur, therefore you experience pain. It's objective, it's real.
And on the other side.
On the other side, you had medically unexplained symptoms. Conditions like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, or localized pain where the MRI shows absolutely no structural damage.
The classic, we ran the blood panels, the scans are clean, you're perfectly healthy, maybe you should see a therapist, brush off.
Exactly. The patient is sitting there in absolute agony, and the doctor is essentially telling them their pain isn't real. For decades, the medical establishment essentially dismissed these as psychosomatic.
But Dr. Barsky's research changes that.
Yes, his research on viscerosomatic amplification proves that this hard wall between explained and unexplained is a biological fiction.
Wait, a fiction? How?
Because all physical symptoms, whether they originate from a visible bleeding wound or not, are ultimately processed through the exact same neural pathways in the brain.
Okay, I think the paper called this interoception.
It is an incredibly complex neurobiological process called interoception, yes.
Interception, like the internal version of perception.
Precisely. We all know exteroception. That's how we perceive the outside world through sight, sound, and touch.
Right, looking at a tree, hearing a bird.
But interoception is your brain's continuous mapping of the internal landscape of your body. It is constantly monitoring your heart rate, your respiratory effort, your gastrointestinal tract, your muscle tension.
So it's always running in the background.
Always. But here is the critical breakthrough in the paper. The conscious experience you have of a symptom is not just a raw data feed. It is a heavily edited amalgam.
Heavily edited. What do you mean by that?
It is a mixture of bottom-up sensory input and top-down cognitive appraisal.
Okay, let's unpack this top-down versus bottom-up idea because it's super important.
Sure.
If I stub my toe, the nerve endings in my toe send a signal up my leg, up my spinal cord, and into my brain. That's the bottom-up sensory input, right? The raw data.
Correct. That is the inceptive signal, the raw electricity of tissue damage.
Okay, so what is the top-down cognitive appraisal doing to that signal? Are you saying my brain is actively editing how much that toe actually hurts before I even feel it?
Yes, that is exactly what happens. Before that raw electrical signal reaches your conscious awareness, it passes through specific regions of the brain.
Like which regions?
Most notably the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. These regions are responsible for attaching emotional salience and contextual meaning to the sensation.
So your brain essentially asks, what does this signal mean? Is it dangerous? Should I care about it?
Precisely. If your top-down cognitive processing, which is fueled by your beliefs, your past traumas, and your current level of anxiety assigns a high threat level to that sensation, your brain literally amplifies the signal.
It makes it louder.
It recruits more neural networks to pay attention to it.
So if I am lying in bed, trapped in that disaster movie mindset, and I'm terrified that a mild stomachache is actually, I don't know, stage 4 pancreatic cancer,
Yes.
my brain's belief system will physically alter the neural processing of that stomachache to make it hurt exponentially more.
That is exactly what the neuroscience demonstrates. If you believe a symptom is a harbinger of death, your brain heightens your vigilance.
Wow.
It shines a massive neurological spotlight on the sensation. It makes it feel more noxious, more intrusive, more frequent, and demonstrably more painful.
So the physical sensation is real, but the volume dial is being cranked up to the maximum by your psychological terror.
Yep.
You know, it's like having a live microphone that gets too close to an amplifier speaker.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. You start with a totally normal, quiet hum of bodily sensation, maybe a little bit of gas moving through the intestine, or a minor ache in a muscle you overworked. That's the hum.
Right.
But your anxiety is the microphone. You hold it up to that minor sensation, the microphone picks it up and feeds it into the brain's amplifier. The brain projects the sound louder.
And then the microphone picks up the louder sound.
Exactly, and feeds it back into the amplifier. And within seconds, you have this deafening, agonizing screech that takes over your entire reality.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Thanks. The screech is a real sound. It is physically hurting your ears, but it was entirely generated by the feedback loop.
It is. But I would argue it's actually even worse than just a loud, distracting noise.
Worse how?
Because in the human body, that screech doesn't just hurt, it physically damages the speaker itself. When you are caught in that viscerosomatic feedback loop, your brain operates under a powerful disconfirmatory bias.
Disconfirmatory bias, meaning you only see the evidence that proves you are dying, and you are blind to the evidence that you are fine.
Precisely. Let's say you have developed a severe fixation on your cardiovascular health.
Oh, yeah.
Because your brain's threat detection system is hyper-aroused, you will consciously notice every single time your heart rate slightly increases when you walk up a flight of stairs or stand up too quickly.
And you log that as evidence of heart failure.
You do. But your brain completely discards and ignores the 10,000 other moments throughout the day when your heart is beating with perfect, healthy regularity.
You construct a reality entirely out of the anomalous data points. That is wild.
Yes.
But earlier I asked if this goes beyond just perception. You said the screech damages the speaker. How does this cognitive distortion physically harm the body?
We can see the mechanism clearly when we look at the nocebo effect, which Dr. Barsky's paper highlights. We are all familiar with the placebo effect, right?
Right, the incredible phenomenon where you're given an inert sugar pill, you genuinely believe it is a powerful medicine, and your body actually physically heals itself.
Exactly. The power of positive expectation. The nocebo effect is the dark mirror to that. It is the power of negative expectation.
So expecting to get sick.
Yes. In clinical trials, patients are given a sugar pill, but are explicitly warned that it carries a high risk of severe side effects. Nausea, vomiting, intense headaches.
And what happens?
A significant percentage of those patients will actually experience severe vomiting and migraines despite having absolutely no active pharmaceutical agent in their bloodstream.
No way. So their brain's expectation of illness literally manifests the physiological symptoms of the illness. Their brain tells their stomach to revolt.
Yes, and it goes deeper into the endocrine system. When your brain is locked in this viscerosomatic amplification loop, it perceives you are under constant mortal threat.
So it panics.
It activates the HPA axis,
Mhm.
the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline.
Which are stress hormones.
Yes. While these stress hormones are vital for escaping a tiger in the jungle, chronic, unrelenting exposure to high levels of cortisol is physically catastrophic.
Because it actively suppresses your immune system, right?
It suppresses the immune system, it increases systemic inflammation, it disrupts cellular repair, and it slows down your natural healing processes.
So, by being terrified that you're getting thick.
You are creating the exact biological environment for disease to take hold and thrive. The fear of the illness paves the way for the illness.
That is deeply unsettling, to know that our own neurobiology has this trap door built into it.
It is a profound vulnerability.
It really is. And it brings us to a massive transition point in our deep dive.
Where do we go from here?
Well, if human beings are fundamentally wired to fall into this mind-body feedback loop, if we naturally amplify our own symptoms through anxiety and hypervigilance,
Right.
how does the global healthcare system respond to this vulnerability? Do they act as the calming voice of reason, stepping in to break the feedback loop and lower our cortisol?
Or do they look at that vulnerability and see an opportunity?
Exactly. Do they benefit from the panic?
To answer that, we have to pull back from the microscopic neurobiology and look at the macro-level sociology of medicine. And that brings us to the philosophical essay included in our stack of sources, titled The Machiavellian Doctor.
Right. Now, for those of you listening, Niccolo Machiavelli was the 16th century Italian philosopher who wrote The Prince.
A classic.
He essentially authored the definitive playbook on how rulers can use power, manipulation, and specifically the emotion of fear to control large populations and maintain their authority.
Yes. And this essay takes Machiavelli's political theories and overlays them onto the medical profession.
The historical context provided by the author is quite revealing, isn't it?
It really is. It traces this dynamic back to the crucible of medieval Europe, specifically during the devastating outbreaks of the bubonic plague.
Oh, the plague doctors.
Yes. You have to imagine an era characterized by mass death, utter societal collapse, and a complete lack of scientific understanding regarding pathogens.
In that environment of total suffocating uncertainty, the physician, often wearing the terrifying beaked mask filled with herbs, was perceived as the sole, absolute gatekeeper between life and death.
They were basically treated as demigods.
Yeah, and that dynamic instantly forged a massive structural power imbalance. The populace was entirely desperately dependent on the physician.
And that dependence wasn't born out of a mutual partnership. It was fundamentally rooted in the visceral fear of dying in agony. The physician held the monopoly on hope.
Monopoly on hope.
Yeah.
I like that phrasing. And the provocative argument the essay makes is that this dynamic didn't just fade away when we invented antibiotics and MRI machines.
No, it simply evolved into a more sophisticated architecture.
Right. It points specifically to the architecture of modern public health campaigns. Now, I want to be very clear with you listening. The sources we are analyzing touch on some highly charged, controversial territory regarding public health policy.
Extremely charged.
Yeah, so we are not here to take a side or endorse a political viewpoint on mandates or lockdowns. We are simply impartially unpacking how the essay analyzes the mechanics of medical messaging.
Which is crucial to understand.
Right. And the text argues that medical authorities have consistently used fear as their primary lever to ensure patient compliance.
The text presents a deeply complex ethical dilemma here.
What's the dilemma?
On one side of the coin, you have public health officials and epidemiologists who genuinely, desperately want to save human lives. They look at the data and they know, objectively, that if they can get 80% of the population to take a specific vaccine or adhere to a specific quarantine measure, they will break the chain of transmission.
And prevent a catastrophic loss of life.
Exactly. But human beings are notoriously bad at risk assessment and compliance.
We really are.
So to get millions of independent individuals to suddenly change their behavior, officials often decide that nuanced, purely statistical messaging isn't effective.
So what do?
They rely on fear-based messaging. They highlight the most catastrophic, agonizing outcomes to shock the public into action.
Ah, the ends justify the means. It's the classic Machiavellian calculation. If scaring people saves their lives, then scaring them is a moral imperative.
That is the argument, yes. But the question the source raises is, what is the collateral damage of that strategy?
Right. Where is the fine line between promoting a necessary life-saving public health action and manipulating fear to maintain institutional control.
Or to ensure massive budgets and generate unprecedented pharmaceutical profits.
Because when you use fear as a blunt instrument, it leaves a scar.
It absolutely does.
And the sources argue that this continuous generational exposure to medical fear-mongering has resulted in what they term the culture of dependency.
The culture of dependency.
Think about how we are conditioned. From the time we are children, we are constantly subtly messaged that the human body is this incredibly fragile, unpredictable machine that is constantly on the verge of breaking down.
We are told that we are entirely incapable of understanding its warning signs.
Yeah, and that any minor, unexplained symptom could be a silent, invisible killer. We were literally taught to be helpless.
You are conditioned to abdicate all responsibility for your physical autonomy to the institution.
Right.
And the behavioral result is exactly what we see in clinics today. People rush to an urgent care center for every minor, self-limiting ailment.
A patient develops a slight scratch in their throat and a runny nose. It is almost certainly a mild rhinovirus.
A simple cold.
But because they are trapped in that viscerosomatic amplification loop we discussed,
And because the culture has taught them that symptoms equal danger,
they demand professional intervention. They demand a prescription. They want the doctor to do something, even if doing something is the wrong move.
yes. Which leads to the massive crisis the sources point out, the overprescription of antibiotics. A doctor knows the antibiotic won't cure a viral cold,
But the patient is terrified and demanding a solution.
and the doctor is pressured by time constraints and the need to maintain patient satisfaction scores, so they write the prescription anyway.
Just to get them out the door.
Exactly. Multiply that interaction by millions over decades, and it directly drives the global existential crisis of antimicrobial resistance and the creation of deadly superbugs.
Wow.
The system, whether by intentional design or by a tragic alignment of incentives, fosters an environment where the patient is stripped of their autonomy. And that very dependency is what is actually making the population sicker.
You know, I keep thinking about how this compares to other industries.
How so?
It's like dealing with a corrupt mechanic who absolutely refuses to teach you how to check your own oil
Yeah.
or understand your dashboard.
Okay, I see where you're going.
They intentionally keep the hood of the car locked. They use incredibly dense, confusing jargon to explain how the engine works.
Yeah.
So every single time a tiny, ambiguous light flickers on your dashboard, you experience a wave of panic.
Right, you don't know if it's serious or not.
You don't know if the transmission is about to literally explode on the highway or if it's just a faulty sensor wire.
Yeah.
And because you are completely deprived of the knowledge to assess the risk yourself, you have no choice but to tow the car to the mechanic.
And pay them whatever they ask just to plug in their diagnostic machine.
Exactly. It is a classic knowledge monopoly.
Hmm.
Which makes me wonder, and I want your take on this, as you read through all these historical and psychological sources, do you think this medical knowledge monopoly is actively malicious? Or is the system just broken and overwhelmed?
Well, the synthesis of the sources suggests it isn't necessarily a cabal of evil doctors twirling their mustaches in a back room.
Okay, that's somewhat comforting.
It is a combination of massive systemic inertia and deeply misaligned economic incentives. It is undeniably massively profitable to have a dependent, anxious patient base that requires constant, billable, professional intervention.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the medical system has historically protected its prestige by using complex Latin terminology and gatekeeping data. Because they do not share transparent, easily understandable, contextualized information, the patient is left stumbling in the dark.
And that darkness is what makes them so vulnerable to that 2 a.m. Google spiral.
Exactly. They are trapped between a rock and a hard place, their own amplifying catastrophic neurobiology on the inside, and a medical system that gatekeeps the vital reassurance they desperately need on the outside.
It's a perfect storm. And if you recognize that the traditional healthcare model is functionally and perhaps financially incentivized to keep the hood of the car locked, you realize that you can't fix the problem from within the system.
No, you really can't.
The only way to break a knowledge monopoly of this scale is to introduce a tool that lives entirely outside that ecosystem, a tool that intercepts the fear before it even has a chance to manifest into physical symptoms.
And that brings us to the centerpiece of our deep dive, the antidote.
Enter Dr. Maya.
This is where the story shifts from diagnosing the problem to engineering the solution. Dr. Maya GPT is a highly advanced AI health assistant, and the context of its creation is vital here.
Right. Who built it?
It was created by Dr. Kadiali M. Srivatsa. He is not some Silicon Valley software engineer trying to disrupt a space he doesn't understand.
He's a real doctor.
He is a physician, specifically a critical care and neonatal expert with over 40 years of grueling clinical experience.
He's been in the trenches.
Exactly. He spent 4 decades standing in intensive care units and crowded clinics, watching this exact culture of dependency and fear play out in real time. He saw the toll that unnecessary panic took on patients and the crushing burden it placed on hospital infrastructure.
So he built Dr. Maya to be the exact opposite of the Machiavellian doctor.
He did.
And the name itself is incredibly deliberate, isn't it? M-A-Y-A. M-A-Y-A. It's an acronym that stands for Medical Advice You Assess. But it operates on a much deeper philosophical level, too. It's a Sanskrit word, right?
Yes, it is. In ancient Sanskrit, Maya translates roughly to illusion or magic. It refers to the cosmic illusion that the phenomenal world is the ultimate reality.
Wow, okay.
The underlying design philosophy of this AI is rooted in that concept. It is telling the patient your fear, that terrifying, catastrophic disaster movie your brain is currently spinning about your chest pain, is Maya.
It's an illusion.
It is an illusion generated by your anxiety. The AI is engineered specifically to pierce through that psychological illusion and ground your mind back in objective biological reality.
Okay, that sounds beautifully poetic. But as a consumer, I have to be incredibly skeptical here.
Naturally.
Because we've all used digital symptom checkers.
Yeah.
If you go to WebMD or any major hospital's website right now, there's a chatbot or a little form you can fill out, and they are universally terrible.
They really are.
They're anxiety-generating machines. How is Dr. Maya mechanically different from the AI that's already out there?
This is where we need to dive deep into the R&D documents, specifically the perplexity research analysis included in our stack. To understand why Dr. Maya is revolutionary, you have to understand why the existing tools fail so spectacularly.
Okay, let's hear it.
Traditional symptom checkers rely on an architecture called a linear binary decision tree.
A flowchart.
Exactly. It's a rigid, pre-programmed flowchart of yes or no questions. The algorithm asks, do you have a headache? You click yes. It moves to the next branch. Do you have a fever? You click no. It moves down the line.
And inevitably, no matter what path you take down that flowchart, it always seems to end with a bright red warning telling you to go to the emergency room because you might have the bubonic plague.
Because binary flowcharts are fundamentally unsuited to the incredibly messy, nuanced reality of human biology. Biology is not binary.
Right.
The perplexity research highlights a staggering statistic. These traditional flowchart-based AI symptom checkers achieve an abysmal primary diagnostic accuracy rate of only 19 to 54%.
Wait, 19 to 54%. That is a coin flip. Actually, on the low end, it's significantly worse than a coin flip.
It's terrible.
If a human doctor had a 19% accuracy rate, they would have their medical license revoked immediately. No wonder everyone leaves those websites feeling terrified. So if the binary tree is a mathematical failure, what does Dr. Maya do instead?
Dr. Maya abandons the binary sequential questioning entirely. Instead, its core diagnostic architecture is built around a concept called the 3-symptom triad.
3-symptom triad.
Yes. To use the system, it requires the user to input exactly 3 concurrent symptoms at the same time.
Okay, let me stop you there, because as someone who follows tech, my instinct pushes back hard against that limitation.
Why is that?
The whole promise of modern AI, with large language models and massive neural networks, is its ability to ingest and process colossal amounts of data instantly. If the AI is so powerful, why force a bottleneck?
You're wondering why limit it to 3?
Exactly. Why limit it to exactly 3 symptoms? Why not have the user upload their entire medical history, 50 different data points, their diet, their sleep logs, and let the AI grind all that data to get the absolute most accurate picture possible?
It's a very logical question, but it assumes that more data always equals better clinical insight, which isn't how medicine works.
It isn't.
No. The limitation of 3 symptoms isn't a technical constraint. It is a deliberate emulation of actual expert clinical reasoning. The perplexity research breaks this down brilliantly. In the entirety of human medicine, across thousands of known illnesses, there are only about 52 diseases that possess what clinicians call pathognomonic signs.
Pathognomonic, let's define that for the audience. That means a specific physical sign or symptom that is completely unique to one and only one specific disease.
Correct. For example, Koplik spots, tiny white lesions inside the mouth, are pathognomonic for measles.
Oh, interesting.
If a doctor sees them, the diagnosis is 100% confirmed without a doubt. but there are only roughly 52 of those in existence. For the vast, overwhelming majority of human conditions, a single isolated symptom tells a doctor absolutely nothing of value.
Because it could be anything.
Exactly. A cough could mean you inhaled some dust, you have a mild cold, you have pneumonia, or you have end-stage lung cancer. The single data point is functionally useless.
So doctors don't diagnose based on a single complaint.
Never. Expert frontline physicians utilize a cognitive process called pattern recognition. They aren't looking at isolated data points. They're looking for specific clusters of symptoms that appear in constellation with one another.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
If a patient presents with a severe cough, a high sustained fever, and a sharp stabbing pain in their side when they inhale, that specific triad of symptoms creates a recognizable geometric pattern in the physician's mind that immediately points toward Levar pneumonia.
So Dr. Maya is mathematically mimicking the intuitive pattern recognition of a human expert. And the sources actually connect this modern AI architecture to ancient history, don't they?
Yes, the research explicitly links this triad approach to the principles found in the Charaka Samhita, which is one of the foundational ancient texts of Ayurveda.
So this is old wisdom.
Very old. Thousands of years ago, Ayurvedic practitioners realized that holistic symptom clustering was vastly superior to isolating individual complaints. They looked at the balance of systems.
Then how does the AI do it today?
Dr. Maya uses advanced vector databases and neural networks to map out these three symptom clusters against millions of known medical presentations. And it's vital to state, Dr. Maya is not attempting to give you a definitive, legally binding medical diagnosis.
Right, which would be illegal and highly unethical for an unmonitored AI to do.
Exactly. The goal isn't to diagnose, the goal is to triage. It acts exactly like a highly experienced triage nurse or a junior doctor in a busy emergency department.
So it's sorting.
It takes the pattern, assesses the mathematical risk level, and answers the only question that actually matters to the patient in that moment. Do I need to go to a hospital right now, or can I just drink some water and go to sleep?
Speaking of taking this system out of the traditional hospital environment and breaking that knowledge monopoly, I want to bring up a specific, incredibly powerful use case that is detailed in the updates regarding Dr. Maya.
Okay, sure.
Because it addresses a massive pain point for both patients and doctors. You mentioned earlier how people are desperate for reassurance. What happens when people actually get their hands on their own medical data, like a blood test result?
Oh, that's a perfect example.
The lab hands them a piece of paper or sends a PDF to their portal. They open it up, and what do they see?
They see an impenetrable wall of medical acronyms and raw numbers. They see CBC, HDL, LDL, AST, ALT, accompanied by arbitrary reference ranges and occasionally a terrifying red flag next to a value that is 0.1% outside the normal bound.
Exactly. And because the system has locked the hood of the car, the patient has no idea how to interpret it. The materials we reviewed mention a specific scenario. Let's look at the case study of a patient named Raji.
Ah, yes. The blood test scenario.
When doctors, like the creator of Maya, give public lectures, people in the audience will literally hunt down their personal phone numbers.
They really do.
They will take photos of their blood test results and text them to the doctor, asking for a free second opinion. They aren't patients, they haven't paid for a consult, but the sheer desperate need to understand their own body drives them to bypass the system entirely.
It perfectly illustrates the crisis of health literacy and the culture of dependency. The patient possesses their own biological data, but it is entirely useless to them because it's encoded in the language of the monopoly.
Right. They require the priest's class of medicine to translate it.
Exactly. And this is where Dr. Maya steps in and completely democratizes that information. The process is remarkably elegant.
How does it actually work for the user?
The user doesn't need to beg a doctor for an off-the-clock favor. They simply click a link on a Prima kiosk, which we'll discuss later, or they use their smartphone. They take the PDF or a scan of their lab results, and they literally just drop it into the Dr. Maya text box.
And what the AI does next is far more sophisticated than just reading the numbers, right?
It is. It utilizes its integration with the vast ChatGPT library and its specific medical training to cross-reference every single value. It identifies the abnormalities.
But it doesn't just hand back a list of highs and lows, which would trigger the viscerosomatic amplification we discussed in segment 1. It contextualizes the data.
Right. The prompt specifically notes that the AI explains the results so clearly that a child could understand it.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It translates the jargon into a fifth-grade reading level.
It tells the user exactly why the doctor ordered that specific test in the first place, what the abnormal value actually means in the context of their specific body, and what immediate practical action they should take.
So if it's a minor issue, say mildly elevated cholesterol, the AI provides tailored advice on dietary changes and lifestyle modifications.
Yes. But if the tests require clinical examination or further tests, Maya will refer the user back to a doctor, ensuring there is no delay in diagnosis.
And we must emphasize the profound systemic impact of this capability. Think about how Dr. Maya AI helps alleviate fear, reduce unnecessary hospital consultations, and minimize physical hospital visits.
It's a game changer for hospital logistics.
If a patient's lab results show a minor vitamin deficiency, historically they would have to schedule a follow-up appointment, drive to the clinic, and sit in a waiting room for an hour.
A waiting room filled with people who are actually sick with contagious respiratory viruses.
Exactly. They are exposing themselves to nosocomial or hospital-acquired infections simply to have a doctor tell them to buy an over-the-counter iron supplement.
It makes no sense. By providing this personalized, easily understandable interpretation remotely and critically, providing it in the user's preferred native language, Dr. Maya is protecting the patient from physical exposure while simultaneously shattering the anxiety of the unknown.
Until now, traditional symptom checkers and apps explain tests in general, not tailored to individual users.
Right. Maya is dynamically tailoring the translation to the individual user's exact neurobiology and literacy level.
It's giving them the keys to their own car. But this brings up a crucial logistical question. Once you input your 3 symptoms, or once the AI analyzes your blood test, how does it actually communicate the risk back to you?
That is the big challenge.
Because if we go back to our first segment, we know that the brain is a hair trigger trap. If the AI uses the wrong words or lists a terrifying disease, it's going to instantly trigger that viscerosomatic amplification. It's going to spike your cortisol and send you into a panic.
Of course.
How do you tell someone they might be sick without feeding the disaster movie mind?
This brings us to the core mechanics of patient empowerment, and arguably the most brilliant psychological design feature of the system, the color-coded circuit breaker.
Color-coded?
Yes. The brilliance of Dr. Maya lies in its radical simplicity. It takes all the staggering complexity of medical risk, millions of data points, and probabilistic calculations, and it translates it into 4 universal instinctual colors.
Red, yellow, green, and blue. Let's break down the logic of each.
Okay. Red indicates a high probability emergency. If your 3 symptom triad flags as red say you input severe, crushing chest pain, sudden shortness of breath, and pain radiating down your left arm, the AI does not diagnose you with a myocardial infarction.
It doesn't use the medical term.
No. It flashes red and unequivocally advises you to seek immediate emergency medical attention or call an ambulance.
Okay, what about yellow?
Yellow indicates a moderate, non-life-threatening concern. It advises you to consult a local chemist or pharmacist in the morning, or perhaps book a non-urgent appointment with your general practitioner.
Oh, green.
Green means the symptoms are minor and self-limiting. The advice is simple: self-care, rest, hydration, or utilizing a nurse triage line.
And the 4th color, blue, is incredibly unique for a symptom checker. I haven't seen that anywhere else.
Yes. The blue code is a specialized epidemiological tool. It is specifically triggered for infectious or highly contagious diseases.
Oh, wow.
If your triad suggests a transmissible pathogen like influenza, a novel coronavirus, or a highly contagious gastrointestinal bug, the AI immediately flags it blue and advises the user to physically isolate to prevent spreading the infection to their family or community.
This color system, when you really think about the psychology behind it, it operates like a circuit breaker for the anxious mind.
It does.
If you were sitting there at 2 a.m. and your brain is running the disaster movie, you are visualizing the names of 100 different horrific rare diseases. You are obsessing over the syllables of the pathology.
But Dr. Maya refuses to give you the name of a disease.
Exactly. It deprives the anxiety of the vocabulary it needs to spin a narrative. It just gives you a color. It replaces the endless, terrifying what-ifs with objective, calming logic.
It's very grounding.
You don't need to know the specific Latin name of the bacterial infection in your throat. You just need to know that the screen is yellow, which means you can safely go to sleep and visit the pharmacy in the morning. It strips the horrific narrative entirely away.
It forces the hyper-aroused brain to pause It shifts the cognitive processing from the emotional center, the amygdala, back to the prefrontal cortex, the logical center.
That's amazing.
And this psychological intervention is enforced by another incredible and highly controversial feature detailed in the business plan. Dr. Maya has a hard-coded safety boundary where the application intentionally and automatically freezes and locks the user out if they attempt to use the triage system more than 3 times in a single 24-hour period.
Okay, here's where I have to push back hard.
I thought you might.
Think about the landscape of modern technology. Every single app on your phone, social media, news aggregators, mobile games, is engineered by armies of psychologists in an attention economy. Their entire business model is maximizing engagement.
They want you addicted.
They want you scrolling infinitely. They want you addicted to the interface. And here is a healthcare application that is deliberately engineered to make you stop looking at it. It literally cuts you off.
It's completely counterintuitive to tech norms.
But as much as I appreciate the anti-capitalist vibe of that, it sounds incredibly dangerous. What if a user uses their 3 searches on a minor headache at noon, and then at 11 p.m., they start experiencing actual signs of a stroke? If the app freezes them out, aren't they in mortal danger?
It is a profound ethical tension, but the design is rooted in deep clinical psychology. If we tie the freeze feature back to the reassurance trap and the obsessive-compulsive checking loops we dissected in the first segment, the life-saving nature of the boundary becomes clear. Remember, a person suffering from severe health anxiety does not use a symptom checker once. They will sit on the edge of their bed and run permutations dozens, sometimes hundreds of times a night.
Changing the inputs.
Yes, they will tweak the symptoms slightly. What if I say the pain is sharp instead of dull? What if I add a slight fever? They are desperately trying to manipulate the algorithm into giving them that elusive 100% guarantee of safety.
They're just pulling the lever on a slot machine of anxiety.
Exactly. And every time they pull the lever, they feed the viscerosomatic loop. By freezing after 3 uses, Dr. Maya takes the lever away.
It sets a hard limit.
It actively prevents the user from obsessively, destructively health checking. It sets a firm, unyielding boundary. The AI delivers a definitive, color-coded answer and then essentially says, I have given you the assessment, now you must sit with it.
Wow.
It forces the user to tolerate the initial spike of anxiety without engaging in the compulsive behavior, which is the exact gold standard therapeutic intervention for breaking an OCD cycle.
Okay, I see the psychological benefit. But you didn't answer my question about the stroke. How does the system handle the physical danger of locking someone out? Or what happens if someone doesn't even know how to use the triad?
What do you mean?
What if an elderly patient only inputs one single word, like dizziness? Does the AI just shut down and refuse to help?
Yeah.
Because a blanket refusal feels like it would cause massive panic.
You are right to challenge that, and the R&D documents address this exact edge case explicitly. In the earliest iterations of the software, there was a strict binary rule. If the user did not provide a complete triad of 3 symptoms, the AI would refuse to provide advice, citing the high risk of diagnostic error.
Which would freak people out.
Yes, clinical testing revealed exactly what you suggested, that a hard rejection causes the user's stress to skyrocket. So the updated protocol in the Gemini research models insists on a deeply nuanced conversational approach.
Conversational.
Instead of a blanket refusal, if a user inputs a single ambiguous symptom like dizziness, Dr. Maya utilizes targeted, dynamic follow-up questions. It simulates the bedside manner of an empathetic human doctor.
Like asking them to rate the dizziness on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yes, or asking contextual questions. Did the dizziness start suddenly, or has it been gradual? Are you experiencing any changes in your vision or difficulty speaking? It gently guides the user through the process of completing the triad.
That's really smart.
And here is the crucial safety override addressing your stroke scenario. If that single symptom or the user's subsequent answers indicate a massive pathognomonic red flag like sudden unilateral paralysis or the inability to form a sentence, the system instantly overrides the triad requirement, overrides any freeze protocols, triggers a red alert, and directs the user to an emergency room.
So it won't just lock you out if you're dying.
Never. It is designed to be clinically rigorous, but it is never, ever dismissive.
That level of algorithmic thoughtfulness shows that Dr. Maya isn't just a cold, calculating math equation. It is genuinely trying to simulate the intuition, caution, and bedside manner of a truly great physician.
It really is.
And that leads us beautifully into the next major theme of our deep dive, because the research documents push for this AI to develop a level of deep empathy and contextual awareness that allows it to detect horrifying realities that a standard yes or no flowchart would be completely blind to. Let's talk about nuance and hidden truths.
The evolution of how the AI filters risk is a perfect testament to this. If you look at early versions of basic symptom checkers on the internet, they were notoriously hostile to anyone who wasn't in perfect baseline health.
Right.
If you checked a box indicating you had a complex medical history, say you were a type 1 diabetic, or you were currently undergoing chemotherapy, or you simply had high blood pressure, the algorithm would immediately throw up its hands.
It would just grit on you.
Yes, would flash a generic warning saying, "System not applicable to complex patients," and tell you to consult your doctor.
Which, if you are a person living with a chronic illness, is incredibly frustrating and alienating. You are essentially locked out of the convenience and reassurance of digital triage just because your baseline human biology is a little more complicated than average. You're penalized for being chronically ill.
Exactly. The updated Gemini integration detailed in the source materials demands a vastly superior, nuanced approach. Dr. Maya evaluates the baseline physiological risk of the specific human being in front of it. It understands context.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For example, a specific 3-symptom triad, let's say a mild fever, fatigue, and a slight rash, might result in a comforting green advice code for a perfectly healthy, athletic 20-year-old.
Okay.
But if the system knows the user is currently pregnant or elderly or severely immunocompromised, that exact same cluster of symptoms is instantly escalated to a red emergency.
Oh, wow.
The AI doesn't just evaluate the abstract symptom, it evaluates the symptom in the exact context of the specific human organism experiencing it.
That is impressive clinical nuance.
Yeah.
But the materials reveal that the AI's ability to read context goes way beyond just physical risk factors like diabetes or pregnancy. One of the most powerful and frankly sobering sections of the documents discusses how Dr. Maya is deployed to detect hidden systemic abuse.
Yes. This is a very heavy topic.
We are talking about child abuse, domestic violence, and coercive control. I have to ask, how does a math equation know someone is being abused? How does an algorithm detect trauma?
It achieves this through incredibly sophisticated natural language processing, or NLP.
Okay.
When a patient interacts with Dr. Maya, they aren't just clicking rigid drop-down menus. They are encouraged to use natural conversational language, either by typing text or speaking into the microphone.
Okay.
The NLP models are trained to evaluate not just the explicit dictionary definition of the medical symptoms, but the soft data embedded in the communication. They analyze the emotional sentiment, the specific syntax, the grammatical word choices, and the anomalous combinations of statements.
The sources gave some absolutely heartbreaking examples of this. A user might type in, "I fell down the stairs again. I'm just really clumsy."
Sure.
Or a teenager might mention, "I'm not allowed to use my phone during the day."
Right. To a standard linear algorithm that is blindly hunting for a disease pathology, the word clumsy is mathematically meaningless, and the phrase "not allowed to use my phone" is instantly discarded as irrelevant non-medical data. The flowchart moves on.
It just ignores it.
But Dr. Maya is programmed with a different set of priorities. It flags these specific linguistic patterns. It recognizes that repeated mentions of clumsiness combined with physical trauma or grammatical structures that indicate a profound lack of personal agency and control, like are not physical ailments.
They're red flags.
They are glaring statistical red flags for physical abuse, profound neglect, or coercive controlling behavior in the home.
And what does the AI do when it detects that? It obviously can't send a push notification that says you are being abused, because if the abuser is monitoring the phone, that puts the victim in immediate lethal danger.
The protocol is handled with extreme delicacy. When the AI detects these patterns, it does not confront the user, and it certainly does not trigger a massive, overt alarm.
So what's the intervention?
Instead, it triggers discrete, localized alerts. It provides safe, highly confidential guidance, seamlessly integrated into the medical advice, perhaps offering innocuous-looking links to support agencies.
That's incredibly subtle.
Or, if the AI is being utilized in a clinical setting like a tablet in a waiting room or a Prima kiosk, it quietly flags the attending human clinical staff to initiate a specialized safeguarding protocol before the patient even enters the examination room.
That is a profound paradigm shift. We have spent the last decade culturally conditioned to view artificial intelligence as inherently cold. We think of it as a soulless calculator that strips humanity out of the equation.
That's the common fear.
But in this scenario, the AI is actually acting as a profoundly safe, confidential space for vulnerable adults and terrified children who are simply too paralyzed by fear to speak their truth to a human doctor. Because, let's be honest, human beings can be incredibly intimidating. Humans carry biases. Humans judge you.
A machine does not judge you.
No, it simply listens, observes the pattern, and offers a lifeline.
And critically, it speaks to them in a language they can actually process. The sources place a massive structural emphasis on health literacy. The traditional medical world is an exclusionary fortress built out of Latin terminology and dense jargon that actively alienates and frightens patients.
It's gatekeeping again.
Yes. Dr. Maya is explicitly instructed by its underlying prompts to dynamically adapt its language output to match the literacy level of the specific user. It translates highly complex medical pathology into plain, reassuring, everyday language.
And there's one specific, tiny detail in the prompt instructions that I found incredibly moving. The AI has a hard-coded mandate to end every single interaction, regardless of the severity of the triage, with the exact phrase, "You will get well soon."
It's a beautiful touch.
It sounds so simple, almost like a Hallmark card.
Yeah.
But mathematically, structurally, what is that doing to the patient?
It is the ultimate cognitive antidote to the nocebo effect we discussed an hour ago. By establishing a calm, non-judgmental connection, adapting to the user's native dialect, and providing a definitive, positive affirmation, the AI is actively, biologically intervening in the user's nervous system.
It's literally changing their biology.
It is lowering their heart rate, it is halting the production of cortisol, it is treating the psychological state of terror as a prerequisite to managing the physical state of the body.
So we have built this incredibly empathetic, highly accessible, color-coded triage system that translates medical jargon into plain language and detects hidden abuse. But up until now, we've been talking about it on a micro level.
Right, one-on-one.
One person sitting in their bedroom looking at their phone. What happens when you scale this architecture up? When you take this AI and deploy it across millions of people, across vast, geographically isolated populations.
That's where it gets truly world-changing.
It ceases to be just a personal app and becomes a tool that has the potential to alter the course of global public health. Which brings us to the final frontier of our deep dive: pandemic prevention and the quantum leap.
The global deployment strategy for Dr. Maya, as detailed in the business plans, is fiercely focused on democratizing access. This system was not built exclusively for wealthy individuals with high-speed fiber internet and $1,000 smartphones.
Who is it for?
It is intentionally engineered to operate seamlessly in low-bandwidth, infrastructure-poor environments, such as rural villages in India or remote communities in Africa.
How do they access it without smartphones?
It can be accessed via basic, low-end mobile devices or through community hubs they call Prima kiosks. Furthermore, the system utilizes advanced geolocation data to instantly detect the user's region, automatically interacting with them in their specific local vernacular dialect.
Which is a masterstroke. In one move, the technology breaks down the linguistic barrier, the financial barrier, and the geographical barrier. But how does putting an AI kiosk in a rural village translate to preventing a global pandemic?
It all comes back to the blue color code we outlined earlier and the concept of early detection.
Right, the isolation code.
In the traditional Machiavellian healthcare system, an outbreak of a novel pathogen is almost never detected at ground zero. It is only recognized weeks later when the centralized urban hospitals suddenly start overflowing with severely ill, dying patients.
By the time the institution realizes there is a crisis, the mathematical R0 value is out of control.
The disease has already been silently spreading through the community for weeks. It's too late to contain it organically.
Right. And because the institution was blind to the initial spread, the only tool they have left is the blunt instrument. The hospitals are overwhelmed, the system is collapsing, so the government is forced to mandate massive, coercive, economically devastating lockdowns and scramble to build giant physical testing centers and parking lots. It's reactionary chaos.
Exactly. But with a widely deployed AI like Dr. Maya, the epidemiological surveillance happens organically, voluntarily at the grassroots level.
How does that look in practice?
Imagine a scenario. A cluster of 5 individuals in a remote village, completely independent of one another, all input a specific triad of symptoms over a 2-day period. The AI recognizes the pathognomonic pattern of a novel respiratory virus.
It connects the dots before a human doctor could.
Yes. It instantly flags those users with a blue code, simultaneously alerting the Central Health Authority to a highly localized anomaly. But far more importantly, the AI empowers the individuals in real time. It advises them calmly and clearly in their own language to isolate at home immediately.
It doesn't wait for a government mandate. It gives them the truth on day one.
Yes. And the epidemiological modeling included in the research shows that by catching these infections at day 1 or day 2 of symptom onset and empowering the individual to voluntarily stay home out of civic duty and clear understanding, you can achieve a staggering 40% reduction in secondary transmission rates within the community.
A 40% reduction at the very beginning of the exponential curve. That is literally the mathematical difference between a localized, manageable cluster and a catastrophic global pandemic.
It is.
And the most beautiful part is that it happens without a single authoritarian mandate. It happens simply because people are given clear, truthful information and the free will to protect their own families.
It is the ultimate decentralization of public health, and the technology is pushing even further into the realm of the proactive.
Proactive how?
The final sections of the research detail advanced technological integrations where the Dr. Maya AI interfaces seamlessly with biometric wearable sensors.
Like smartwatches or rings.
Yes. Devices that continuously track your heart rate variability, your resting heart rate, and your basal skin temperature. The AI's machine learning models can process this continuous stream of physiological data to detect the minuscule, invisible perturbations of an incubating illness up to 23 hours before the user even consciously feels their first physical symptom.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. The AI diagnoses you before you even know you were sick, before you feel the cough or the fever.
It detects the pre-symptomatic physiological stress of the immune system going to war. It notices that your heart rate variability dropped in the middle of the night, indicating a systemic inflammatory response.
That is science fiction.
It's reality. And this capability brings us to perhaps the most provocative esoteric concept mentioned in the entire stack of sources, the philosophical and neurobiological concept they refer to as Zeta 9.
Okay, I have been waiting to get to this since I read the outline because my brain short-circuited when I saw it.
Yeah.
The source texts refer to Zeta 9 as a theoretical subatomic particle that responds to human intention before a conscious thought is even fully formed in the brain. What are we actually talking about here? Are the creators of this AI bringing literal quantum physics and subatomic entanglement into a symptom checker? Or is this just a highly poetic, fancy way of saying, if you stay calm, your immune system works more efficiently?
It is a profound unifying metaphor, though Dr. Srivatsa explicitly links it to the bleeding-edge interceptions of quantum biology, neuroplasticity, and ancient philosophies like the law of attraction.
Okay.
Whether you view Zeta 9 as a literal, undiscovered mechanism of quantum entanglement in the brain's microtubules, or purely as a robust psychological framework for self-regulation, the functional clinical reality is exactly the same.
Which is what?
The ultimate overarching goal of Dr. Maya is to intercept the human fear response in the preconscious mind. When you consult the AI at the very first microscopic sign of a symptom, or when your wearable device gently alerts you to a physiological change before you even feel ill, you are stepping into the process before the disaster movie mind has a chance to yell action.
You stop the anxiety before it even has the vocabulary to exist. You prevent the viscerosomatic microphone from ever getting near the speaker.
Exactly. You preemptively halt the catastrophic HPA axis activation. You stop the massive spike in cortisol before it has a chance to suppress your white blood cells. You maintain your physiological and neurological equilibrium.
Wow.
You are literally biologically altering your body's readiness to heal by maintaining a state of calm, objective, and empowered awareness. And by democratizing this incredible capability, placing it directly into the hands of minimally trained community health workers, frantic mothers at 2 a.m., and ordinary citizens across the globe, the system turns everyday people into highly reliable, emotionally regulated first responders.
It entirely removes the absolute terrified reliance on the Machiavellian institution.
It does.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the unbelievable journey we have been on over the last hour. We started by looking inward at the terrifying, destructive power of the human brain. How catastrophic thinking, the reassurance trap, and the neurobiology of interception create a vicious mind-body feedback loop that literally amplifies our physical pain and invites illness.
Right.
We then pulled back to look at the macro level, seeing how historical and modern medical institutions have, whether by design or by inertia, capitalized on that inherent human terror to build a highly profitable culture of dependency and a monopoly on knowledge.
Yes.
And then we explored the antidote, Dr. Maya, a tool built by an insider to break the system, an AI that discards the failing math of binary flowcharts in favor of holistic pattern recognition, A system that can take an impenetrable blood test, strip away the jargon, and explain it to you like a friend.
Very well summarized.
An intelligence that uses a simple four-color triad to bypass our panic, imposes strict boundaries to break our obsessive-compulsive loops, and deploys profound linguistic empathy to detect the hidden traumas of abuse. It is a system that empowers patients with the objective truth, giving them their free will back, and in the process, creates a massive grassroots defense network capable of stopping global pandemics before they start.
It is not just an upgrade to a piece of software. It represents a fundamental philosophical paradigm shift. It is the transition from a reactionary, authoritarian, fear-based healthcare system to a proactive, democratic, empowerment-based model of human wellness.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we end this deep dive. For decades, the great existential fear of the digital age has been that bringing artificial intelligence into the sacred space of medicine would inevitably strip away the human touch. We worried the machines would make care cold, calculated, algorithmic, and robotic.
That was the fear.
But consider the reality of what we have uncovered today. If an artificial intelligence is the one taking the infinite patience to listen to your deepest fears without a shred of judgment, if a machine is the one taking the time to translate terrifying medical jargon into simple, comforting words you can actually understand, and if an algorithm is the one actively protecting your fragile mental health by setting boundaries and stopping you from spiraling into a 2 a.m. panic attack, is it possible that the machine is actually the one teaching us how to make healthcare human again?
It raises a vital, challenging question for all of us about what true, actionable compassion actually looks like in practice. Sometimes compassion isn't a human hand on your shoulder. Sometimes compassion is a system that simply refuses to let you be terrified.
Think about that the next time you find yourself staring at a glowing search bar in the middle of the night, your heart racing, wondering if a simple headache is just a headache. Thank you for joining us for another deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you. Stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, you will get well soon.